Well, hello, 100,000 lovely humans. What the heck? Hello. Welcome to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Jamie Wolfer, and I do wedding planning videos each and every single week to help you plan your wedding as successfully as possible, because there's a crazy world out there, especially in an industry that tells you have to spend all your money to make your event actually worthy enough of attending. And we are here to say, no way, Jose. I am not going to do this intro effectively because we hit 100,000. There are 100,000 of you, and I keep saying this. I know you guys have heard me say this like a bajillion times. I am so grateful for you. Is that my hair? Y'all know. I thought that was my hair. I was like, we're gonna have to scrap this whole video if my hair looks like that. When I first started this channel, the intent behind it, the purpose behind it was like, well, one, I just wanted a YouTube channel. Like I just wanted one. I thought it was like the coolest idea. I just didn't know if like I'd made lifestyle content, if anyone would be interested. I'm like, well, let me just see if anyone's making wedding planning videos. And there was one gal, but she only made a few, and she wasn't talking about American weddings. And so I was like, oh, I'll give this a shot, and maybe it'll help out some of my clients who only book me for a month of coordination and then need help doing planning up until then. What I did not anticipate was like you all. What we accidentally tapped into was this massive, like you guys were not alone, this massive group of people that are crying out for help because they are thrown into this event space, this wedding industry, without any prior experience or knowledge or what they're supposed to do. There's so many societal pressures and there's no one helping them out. And so these videos, this community that we've built together, it's just such an incredible way of reminding you that you are not alone. If your budget is small, or you don't want to spend a lot of money on your wedding, or you just really want to try to figure this out and you're excited and you're just looking for a little bit of direction, you are not alone, because there's 100,000 of you. I didn't anticipate announcing a venue and then hitting 100K and then, oh my gosh, like all this is because you get, okay. I promise I'm not going to go waxing poetic the whole time. I know I use that phrase a lot, but it's a good one, right? Like about how pumped I am, how excited I am. There will be giveaway details coming soon. I highly recommend that you follow us on Instagram, because I'll probably it's easier to communicate there in stories than it is in like a curated video each and every single week. So go ahead and give us a follow. We're still at JW Coordination because our rebrand hasn't gone through, but I digress. Insane. I love you. Thank you for being here. I'm so overwhelmed. Now, I'm not going to take any malarkey about the long intro on this one, okay? Like, y'all are going to give me my 2.5 minutes to freak out because there's so many of you. But now we are going to talk about DIY catering, which is a noble plan, if executed correctly and thoughtfully, is actually possible. So without further ado, let's just jump right on into it. First thing I'm checking out my notes. First thing we're going to chat about is like nothing, at least in my opinion, in my experience, I've never seen any sort of DIY food experience replace that of an actual caterer. Hiring an effective catering service for your wedding meal is such a good idea. Like, nothing is going to replicate an actual catering service. But that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone has the finances to hire a full-blown, full-service, all-inclusive catering package. I certainly didn't, and I know a lot of you can't either. So then you kind of start to think like, well, maybe I could DIY this, maybe I could try this. And now that I've been doing this for 5.5 years, wow, that's actually a long time. Now that I've been wedding planning for this long, I've seen so many people DIY certain elements of their catering, and I have seen what's looked effective and what has turned out to be a complete disaster. So I figured, let's sit on down, let's talk about DIY catering, let's talk about some of the issues or pitfalls that you should pay attention to and how to successfully pull this off. So whether you are only DIYing your appetizers or you are doing a full-blown wedding meal, this video is for you. So here are the things that you must keep in mind. Here are the questions that you should be asking yourself if you are considering DIYing any portion of your catering. Number 1, who's making it? Number 2, who's setting it up? Number 3, who's making sure it stays at the correct temperature? You know, for things like food safety and whatnot. That is a thing. But also because like no one wants a warm salad. 4, who's serving it? People self-serve? That's a good question. 5, what is it being served on and what utensils are being used? 6, who's tearing it down? Because obviously someone's gonna need to clean that up. And 7, who's bussing the tables? Okay? Those are the things that typical caterers will handle for you, no problem. They have that checklist, they're good to go. You don't have to question if those things are being handled from a full service catering staff. Now, there are different catering services. I've already done a whole video on it. I'm gonna go ahead and link it up here if I remember to, but hopefully will, where we talk about all the different levels of a professional catering service, okay? But in this week's video, we're specifically addressing DIY catering. Now let's go ahead and walk through those 7 things step by step. And these all differ. Yikes. These all differ based on like your level of skill when it comes to cooking, how much time you want to put into this, and how hands-on you want to be. Number 1, who's making it? You can absolutely make your own wedding meal. I'm going to throw in some stipulations here though. You need to make it a couple days ahead. You do not want to be up until 2 o'clock in the morning before your wedding day perfecting your mashed potatoes. So really think through some of those food items that will last either in the fridge or the freezer for a few days and simply need to be reheated or tossed together very quickly. Again, we want to make sure that you and or your partner are not cooking the day before your wedding. At this point in time, you have so many friends and family and relatives that are in town that you may not see very often. So we want to make sure that your time is devoted to getting ready for one of the most emotional and lovely days of your life, not slaving over a hot stove. A lot of people also consider doing something like a potluck. Now, this is a wonderful way of serving wedding food. Absolutely. There are a couple stipulations with this one as well, though. Potlucks obviously are a hodgepodge of different meals where everyone brings a meal that serves a handful of people to the event, and basically, if everyone does that, then everyone gets fed. The issue with this potentially could be, 1, potlucks tend to be a lot of sides, a lot of side dishes, which is not necessarily a problem, and a lot of crock pots. So if that's the case, you're going to need quite a bit of power to this location to make sure your food, again, stays the right temperature. This does mean that obviously the setup and the tear down goes a little bit more smoothly because everyone is responsible for their own crockpot or dish that their meal came in. The downside of this is you may need to spend a little bit of time figuring out what everyone is cooking. You already have to chase down RSVPs, so to then go ahead and figure out how many potato dishes are going to be served could be a little bit more in the administrative department than you really want to deal with. The next option of like who makes it could be drop catering. Now we did discuss this in the other catering video that I talked about, but because this is so much more hands-on, it deserves to have a little spotlight moment here in the DIY catering video as well. Drop catering is such a good solution for a situation like this. It's where a restaurant offsite will prepare the food for you, and either someone goes to pick it up for you and they're just in those big disposable aluminum trays, or they will send the restaurant to actually drop it off at your location instead. This can be done with actually a lot of fun chain restaurants when they're like, let us cater your next event. They're not actually coming to do anything at your event, they're just prepping food for a massive amount of people and you get to set it out. The things that you'll need to be cognizant of for this is how is that getting delivered, who's setting it up, the other questions that we already have on our list, but at least you have one thing taken care of, who's making it, and you're basically guaranteed to have a pretty decent meal, and if you're not, then you actually have someone else that you can hold liable for that. At least you won't be blamed for overcooking the mash. And then the last option could be appetizers and desserts. Again, we did touch on this in the other catering video, but it deserves a little spotlight here. If you are just doing appetizers and desserts, you can really control what you're serving to be room temperature friendly. We don't want warm salads or cold soups. We want to make sure that food is being served at the appropriate temperature and at a safe temperature as well. So with appetizers and desserts, you can really control what you're serving in such a way to make sure that it is okay to sit out for a long period of time. Now, I'm going to go ahead and lump setup, tear down, and bussing all into the same category because otherwise it'd be super redundant if I went over them one by one. You will need someone other than yourself in your wedding dress to put your food out on tables, which is a great reminder, you will need tables to serve these on. So if you are DIYing, do remember that you will need to add on extra tables and linens for this food service because that typically can come with a caterer, or a caterer would request the amount of tables and linens they need from you. So that can be one of those details that may get forgotten if you are not working with a professional in this category. You also need something to serve it in. Most of the time, people use chafing dishes, and that's those silver serving dishes that you see at literally every single event that's catered. Maybe not every single one, but you know what I'm talking about. That have sternos underneath them, which is a little pot with a flame in it that keeps the food warm. Again, returning to the temperature thing, if you have food that needs to remain warm in order to be food safe or, just maybe enjoyable, it is a good idea to either borrow rent or buy some chafing dishes to serve those items in. You also need to think through, how are those items being served? Typically with a self-serve buffet, like think about the actual utensils themselves, spoons, tongs, salad forks. How is this food getting out of the tray or the bowl and onto someone's plate? It sounds like a super obvious thing to think about, but we've definitely come across circumstances where something's been DIY'd and there needs to be some sort of utensil to grab it or get it onto the plate, and there isn't one. So it's like, no one's gonna scoop beans with their hands. I mean, maybe my husband would, but you just can't get between that man and his food. In addition to that, at self-serve buffets, people tend to take a lot more than if there's at least a person staring at them while they're scooping. I know this sounds absolutely ridiculous, but it is actually very true. If your buffet station is not monitored or being watched, there's a higher likelihood that you're going to go through food a little bit more quickly because they're just going to keep piling it onto their plates. Now, I'm not saying you have to hire a staff to necessarily do that, although I do think it is in your best interest to hire a couple of servers to help with some of these details, just so you don't have to worry about it. But you will need to plan accordingly and add on a little bit more food, or, 15%, 20% more food for people that will keep scooping onto their plate without even really thinking about it. They're not trying to be mean. They just are excited about your food. Okay, I'm sitting here editing this video right now. I'm eating lunch, so you see my lipstick everywhere. One thing that I can't believe I didn't even address this, it was in my notes and everything, is calculating the amount of food. That is such a hard thing to do if you've never done this before. I don't even know how to tell you how to calculate the food because I've never had experience with that myself beyond maybe 15 people at a holiday once or twice. So take to Google, but you will need to do some research on how much to actually buy. How big are serving sizes? This is something that a caterer knows like the back of their hand. This is what they're paid to do. So if you are going to take this on for yourself, if you're cooking yourself or a family member or friend is cooking for you, you need to figure out how much you need to make. This is so obvious. I don't know how I didn't include this, but welcome to Behind the Scenes, Jamie. You gotta figure out how to calculate it, guys, because it's just you don't want to be wrong. You need to make sure there's enough food. I'm kind of getting these out of order, aren't I? It's fine. We're getting the point anyways, right? And then after the meal, who is tearing down all of those items? If you did rent anything for your wedding, how's that getting cleaned and returned? Who's going to be in charge of that for you? But here's the biggest, we literally just ran into this at the Amsler, actually, because there was not a staff to do this. The caterer left early. Who's bussing your tables? Do not tell me your family and friends are going to do it, because they're not expecting to. They just don't think about it. It's not that they don't have good manners. It's not that they're not wonderful people. It's not that they don't clean up after themselves in their own home. But at an event, people tend to switch off that part and say, I'm here to enjoy myself, to party, to celebrate this love story. Oh, I said it again. Someone said that was so cringy. And I'm like, it comes out. I can't help it. People will not bus unless they are asked repeatedly to do so. Some people may jump up and throw their plate away, throw their cups away, no problem, but most people will not. I kid you not, at this event, because the caterer had left early, there was about 130 guests. It took myself and the wedding planner about 45 minutes, maybe an hour, to bus all of the tables. That's how much trash was there. So do not assume that your family members and friends will just go, oh yeah, we can clean this up. You need to direct multiple people to get that going, to instigate the pickup process. That may very well be all that you need for your guests to go, oh yeah, we can clear the tables, no problem. But they will not think about it themselves because that's not something that's typically required from a bunch of events across the board. I cannot impress this upon you enough. Bussing's the worst part about not going with a professional caterer. I mean, maybe the food as well, but for me, the professional on the other end, I'm like, you need someone to clean your tables because the likelihood of a lot of trash or glassware accumulating on the tables while people are enjoying themselves is pretty stinking high. So have a plan. China, flatware, and glassware. Now, I am a huge fan of renting these items because that just means it's less stuff in the trash. Weddings inherently can be pretty darn wasteful. And so anytime you can cut down on the amount of trash, one, that you have to haul out or a family member has to clean up for you is wonderful. But 2 is also super, super good for the environment. So while it may look like an added cost to rent those items, and you will need to have someone scrape the big food bits off of them afterwards, you are definitely saving in the amount of waste that your event is producing. Now, that's not necessarily a cost that everybody can swallow. So obviously there's still the option of doing disposable. There are definitely some eco-friendly options. We do have a sustainable wedding video here. But again, because you don't have a professional here, you have to think through, how are people receiving their food? How are they putting it into their mouth? How many napkins are you gonna have? How many spare utensils are you gonna have? How many cups are you gonna have? And that stuff definitely starts to add up. Okay, I'm chatting about this way too much. Inevitably, when we talk about this, people are like, well, how do I know how much to have? I don't know exactly. So when it comes to plates, and utensils, we're talking about dinner only. Remember, if you're doing cake, you need an extra set of plates and an extra set of forks. And if you're doing any sort of dessert, you need an extra set of napkins as well. They can just be the little cocktail napkins that can be there and at the bar. So they don't have to be extra special for this. But you need to think through how many times people are eating. So if you have apps, then dinner, then dessert, you may potentially need plates and napkins and or utensils for all 3 of those. So let's say you're having all 3, you have 100 guests, you need at least 300 in order to get everybody fed. Now, there's a chance that not everyone will want apps or dessert, but you still need to be prepared just in case. I would then also recommend adding on like a 20% buffer. That's to account for all of your vendors eating. That's to account for someone dropping their plate or utensil, or things happen. You just need to have a little bit extra. Now, of course, if they're still packaged, they can be returned afterwards. Just something to keep in mind. That's just plates and utensils and napkins. I'm gonna go ahead and pause here and push you towards the DIY bar video because I could go on for a long time about this specifically. Go check that one out. Don't get me wrong, there are definitely some pros about DIY catering. It can be extremely fun and extremely rewarding, especially if you enjoy cooking. It can just be like such a special way of loving on your guests in a way that's extremely tangible. You can make this super cost effective as well. As long as you do your planning right and you have your whole system ready to go, you know who's driving it for you, how it's getting reheated, you can really get crafty with this and get your catering costs down to something that is much more feasible for you and your budget than hiring an all-inclusive catering company. And lastly, it's customizable. Oftentimes when we're working with a catering company, they have a menu to pick from and it can cost a lot to break outside that menu. They might be able to make little tweaks here and there for a small additional fee, but if you want something different, be prepared to pull out your checkbook because it potentially could be a large cost. So this way, then you can make something that you and your partner absolutely love. It's important to you. It's important to your culture. You have a lot more flexibility here. And you knew this was coming. If I was going to say pros, you know cons were about to come out of my mouth. Cons, it is work. So much work. I don't know if you've ever prepared Thanksgiving or a holiday meal for a large group of people. I have. And I got to tell you, I like cooking. I love cooking for people when they come to my house. Oh, it just brings me so much joy. There's so much stress. I mean, it's all good. I'll happily do it year after year, no problem. But you do need to bear in mind that it's not going to be easy. Even if this is what you do professionally, if you're working by yourself, this could still be a lot. It's also stressful. I probably already said that, but it deserves to have its own point. It's going to be more time sensitive because you're working with perishable ingredients, obviously. Much like with DIYing your florals, it needs to be done pretty close to your wedding date. You can freeze some stuff, but it's going to be a flurry of activity right before you get married. It also could be some planning on something you have no idea about. So I would say if you are not an experienced cook, you don't really feel like doing a potluck, go with the drop catering option so at least someone else is making it, and then you can go ahead and think through the other points that we talked about today. But to go ahead and randomly be like, I think I could cook a meal for 80 people, if you haven't done it before, I'm gonna suggest you step back and think that through real fast, okay? And honestly, if you are not careful and creative with how you're spending your money, the cost could potentially add up to be more than you want it to be. Just because you're DIYing it doesn't mean it's going to be cheap. So, how do we do this? Jamie's just gone on forever on this video, but so many people do ask about this, so I really hope that this thoroughness is going to be helpful for you guys. 1, keep it simple. Do not go elaborate. Do not go over the top. Again, unless it's what you do professionally, and then obviously you could run circles around me culinary wise, because I don't know where I was going with that sentence. Moving on. 2, think through the food journey. Walk yourself through the 7 points we just discussed and make sure you have a response to each and every one of those. Make sure you have a plan for all of them. 3, cook ahead. I've already alluded to this, but make sure that all of your cooking is done 2 to 3 days beforehand, and then assign the role to someone else to reheat and get it ready to serve. Because again, you probably won't be able to dump stuff into chafing dishes in your wedding gown. Also, think about where this is going to be reheated, and make sure your venue actually has a prep space to make all this happen. 4, make a food timeline. If someone's gonna come in and help you out, you need to make sure that the food is there, ready, at the right temperature, at the right time. This will not be you, this will be somebody else, so make sure you have a timeline set up for them specifically. Kind of like your day of timeline, but like, you should probably have this in the oven by this time, or it needs to be ready by this time. You know what, why am I over-explaining? You know what timeline is. Moving on. 5, ask for help. I don't know why I forgot that one and I had to look at my notes. You guys, this is the biggest party you've probably ever thrown in your life. It's gonna be a lot of food. There's gonna be a lot of pressure attached to making that food, serving the food, what have you. So make sure you are leaning on the people that are like, hey, what can I do to help? Take them up on that because you have a lot of food to take care of, or set up, or bus, or whatever. This is not the time to fly solo and show people how awesome you are at rocking it by yourself. This is the time to make sure that your food is enjoyable to eat, served well, and cleaned up properly. Which brings us to our very last point. Have a plan for your leftovers and for bussing tables. Bring Tupperware. If you think there is a chance that there might be leftovers and you want to make sure it's not just thrown in the trash, bring something to put that food in. I've seen couples bring multiple small containers so guests can come through and grab a meal to take with them later. That I actually find to be super smart because that means that you or your parents aren't going home with gobs and gobs of food, but everyone can take a meal with them. It's like a nice little parting gesture. And just make sure someone busses your tables. Okay, just have a plan, please. I looked at the planner after the event at the Amsler and I was like, man, I don't miss these days. Back when I was a young, spry wedding planner who didn't really think through some of those things in the very beginning, and I bust a lot of tables. I don't want to jump back on that bandwagon at all. And trust me when I say, you need to have a plan. So that's what we have for this week's video, guys. Thank you so much for stopping by. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to jump on down there, give it a like. Let me know what your catering plans are down below as well. I always love hearing everyone's different ideas, and who knows, maybe you can inspire someone who's going on through those comments. Thank you again for hitting that subscribe button. Guys, I had no idea we'd make it here. I had no idea this would ever come to pass. We will be doing a giveaway soon. I just need to get all those details ironed out, and we'll get those out to you as soon as possible. Give us a follow on Instagram so you can join me for Q&A Mondays, Unpopular Wedding Opinion Thursdays, Wedding Feature Wednesday, all the rhymes and what's, not acronyms, alliteration. Sure, I'm gonna go. Thanks for being here. And until next week, bye guys.